Welcome, everybody, to Dead Talk Live. And tonight we welcome writer, director Richard Bates Jr. Richard, thank you for being here with us. How you doing tonight, man?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Richard has a new movie out called King Knight, which is out now, like I said. We're going to be talking about that in a little bit. But we're going to go to the beginning with Richard. We're going to go back to where it all started, and that is a great film that Richard wrote, directed, started out as a short, then it went on to a feature film called Excision. Now, we're going to break it down, bit by bit. The inception of Excision. It's such a unique story. I mean, actually, talking to you for the first 2 minutes before we went live, I got a really good idea of how you thought that up. But I want you to tell the story. How did the story of Excision come to you?
My gosh. So it was getting old, man. That was it 2007, I think. I don't know. I was kind of trying to write a horror satire about where I grew up while I was still sort of feeling all those feelings. And it was my senior thesis project in college. And then um, I came out here with it and I tried to, I had a feature version prepared. It was all sort of part of the plan. And no one liked it. So, I went from meeting to meeting to meeting. No one was into it. So what I did was I PA'd for a few years and I raised all the money myself with a bunch of my friends. I mean, Excision's got like 40 producers.
Wow.
I was in high school. I was like the kid running around with a camera. I used to go to film camp. Okay, so like it was all I ever wanted to do. And so all these people from back home, sort of in Virginia, were incredibly supportive, and all came together, and we made it happen. And it was just unbelievable. We finished the movie. I bought bunk beds and put them in my living room because a bunch of my friends from college and high school flew out to work on it with me. And then the rest of the crew was a lot of students, like freshman film school students. Um, and yeah, I dropped this DVD in a box, and I found out, I guess, a few months later that it was going to premiere at Sundance. And I got to have a career, and that was really how it happened.
That is great. Now, Pauline, obviously, Excision revolves around the character of Pauline, this disturbed teenage girl who wants to be a surgeon. What was the inspiration for Pauline in particular? I mean, here you have this very disturbed teenager. Starting to watch this film is not going to end in a good way. It's not going to end with a happy ending. What inspired the character of Pauline?
Well, I think the whole surgery aspect. It was this idea that you kind of a lot of kids, at least growing up where I grew up in Northern Virginia, sort of lived to make their parents proud.
By the way,
And if
I'm in Northern Virginia now. I'm in Manassas.
Oh, right on. Okay, yeah, I was in like McLean,
Oh, that's just down the road.
So yeah, so there was just this heightened pressure. It was a strange public school where if you didn't get into a good college, you weren't cool.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So it all sort of stemmed from that. It was this sort of uh, desire to please your parents at all costs, even if that meant deluding yourself into, you know, thinking you could do something that you didn't quite earn because of this pressure to achieve at such a young age.
And Pauline is the complete opposite of that. She doesn't do anything to please her parents or school officials. In fact, she goes out of her way to make sure that everything she does goes against social norms. So is that where the satire part comes into it?
Absolutely, but then there's also this sort of hypocrisy, right? I mean, we're all hypocrites. Where deep, deep, deep down, she still wants to, what could make her parents more proud than being a doctor, right?
Hmm.
And she sort of deludes herself, like I said, into believing she can do this thing and win them over after she feels she's lost them. And it's a sort of desperate attempt to do that. And then her mother sort of realizes uh, that she's had a hand in sort of creating this, and she breaks down. You know what I mean? Um, and there's a strange moment of connection between the two for the first time in the film, and uh, that's how the short film ended as well. It was funny. I finished a short film, and people would say, "Oh my goodness, I can't wait for a feature. I'd love to know what happens next."
Hmm.
And that's the end of the story as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it is, and it's a great way to end it. When going from short to feature, it's happened quite a bit. It's launched plenty of careers, propelled a lot of careers. Uh, the feature film, because of, let's say, budgetary constraints, did you really have to tone it down from what you actually wanted to put on the screen?
No, because I wrote with the budgetary constraints in mind. I mean, I always do, just because each one of these movies, they're kind of, I have this sort of dream of looking back someday on watching these movies when I'm old, and it's sort of chronic chronicling my life, if you will, sort of, like Excision, high school, suburban gothic, like post collegiate malaise, trash fire, trying to figure out how to become an adult, what that means, all these things. So, Tone Deaf's sort of a response to all the political turmoil going on at the time, and confusion, and then this is sort of King Knight is kind of about taking that next step into fatherhood.
Uh,
So, um, I always write them so that if I can't get the budget I want, I can figure out a way to go make it regardless. Because I've never had the budget I wanted for anything,
yeah.
but it's never stopped me. I like creating things, and you can usually always figure out a way.
Exactly. Outthink the obstacle. Now let's talk about the casting. With Excision, you picked Anna Lynn McCord, who was supposed to play this socially awkward teen, Pauline. How do I phrase this? You guys really have to work hard in the makeup chair to make Anna Lynn appear as a socially awkward teenage girl. She's a beautiful woman, basically. Uh, what was it about her that you saw that made her perfect for the feature film to play Pauline?
Well, I mean, she'll be the first to tell you. At first I didn't want her in the movie.
Hmm.
She's this beautiful girl at 90210. I said, hell no. And I mean, can you imagine the sort of the audacity of like a 27-year-old who'd never made a movie before doing that? But I did, and she really, really wanted to do it. And I was working with a few other actors from her agency, and they said, "Look, just go have lunch with Anna Lynn, just knock it out. Just she really wants to do this, please." And I said, "Okay, I'll do it." And I met her at some restaurant. Um, I don't know where the hell it was, but she came in character. I couldn't recognize her,
Wow.
and she,
She
we
must
had
have
so
really wanted the
much.
part.
Yeah, it was really exciting how much she related to Pauline, and she had sort of the same similar sort of childhood in certain ways. And I remember pushing it and being like, you're gonna have to cut your hair. Your show's not gonna let you do that. And she took a knife off the table, and she started cutting her hair off, her real hair.
Jeez.
And I just said, "Oh my goodness, this is Pauline."
You can't
And
say no now.
and now Annalyn and I are like as close as any friends could be. It's we both sort of went through that whole process together. Is wild, and she's amazing. and
Yeah.
and we even were able to use this sort of certain aspects of her beauty in the fantasy sequences, where it was
Hmm.
sort of how she grew to see herself,
Yeah.
you know. her mind. So.
Speaking of the fantasy sequences, that's what makes this sort of like for me, like an artsy type horror movie. Very graphic sequences of her blood involving different characters, the whole sex scene, and how and that wasn't a hallucination or a dream scene, that actually happened. But what you added quite a bit of blood in this movie. Uh, is that how you always wanted to go? What was the background for all that?
Well, that was something that I wished I could have had even in the short, right? Um, but with the short, there's just super budgetary constraints.
Mm-hmm.
I know we shot the movie in seven, or the short film in 7 days. Um, we shot the feature in 27. Hilariously enough, we shot my latest feature, King Knight, the entire feature in 9 days.
Wow.
So 2 days longer than my short film in college. Um, but I remember it was it's very important to me, this sort of blood splatter by way of Jackson Pollock thing. This is beautiful, beautiful blood, and I'd always wanted to sort of make that movie, and when we figured out a way to pull it off, the motel scene is based on a true story, bits and pieces of it.
Oh boy.
But in case my mom's watching this, we will not
Yeah, better.
get into details.
Yeah, better stop there on that one. Matthew
Yep.
Gray Gubler.
Yep.
Okay, he was in Excision, and he's also the star of King Knight. When
Mm-hmm.
Excision got made, he had Criminal Minds was well into 7 years in its prime hit show. Matthew has been on it from day one to the very last episode. Was Criminal Minds what made you go after Matthew? Did you guys know each other?
Actually, it's so I had my friend from Virginia. I lived out here with 4 or 5 friends who grew up. We went to different colleges, but after school we all moved out here together. We got this little house, sort of island of misfit toys type thing, and he was a production assistant on the show Criminal Minds, and I was looking for a casting director, and he gave me the information for the casting director of the show that he worked on. So I just called him. I just was pretty fearless 27-year-old. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just walked in there and I met with the casting director, and he agreed to do the film. And he said, we're talking, and he was like, man, you're a really weird kid. There's this really weird kid on this show, and I think you guys would be good friends. And I was like, oh, that's all right. And then he was like, no, no, no. It walked me on set, like your first day into kindergarten, like, truly embarrassing. I was actually angry. And Matthew's shooting a scene. He's like, Matthew, this is Ricky. You guys are going to be friends. And Matthew was like, okay. So I went home, and at like 5 p.m. I got a call from Matthew, and he was like, hey man, let's go drink some whiskey. And I said, okay. And we went out and we drank some whiskey, and honestly, he's been one of my best friends ever since. He's like an older brother to me. He was the ordained minister at my wife and I's wedding.
Wow.
He's truly one of the best people I know.
And like I mentioned, I mean, Criminal Minds, when Excision came out, at least, was 7 seasons. I mean, it was to call it a hit show is an understatement. His character Spencer was one of the most popular characters. Um, are you sure you're not leaving it? Because something doesn't fit there. I mean, here's this.
I'm not leaving anything out. He went to the same. We both went to NYU, but he was older than me. I never met him at school or anything. That's quite literally what happened.
That is so cool. He sounds like a really down to earth guy.
I mean, he is. I had my friends from Virginia. The first night we hung out, I had my friends from Virginia meet us at this bar, and he crashed on our couch. So it's completely down to earth, and I've never known anyone who works harder and deserves his success more.
Yeah,
Quite
yeah.
frankly.
I mean, he's in a sort of an elite club to be on a hit show for 15 years from day one to the very last day, and there are not that many people that can say that. Uh,
Then he still, as you see from his filmography, still supporting all these independent filmmakers too. So
that is so great. So it was a no-brainer when it came to King Knight. Did you write the role around him? Did you know right away that you wanted Matthew to play the lead role in King
well,
Knight?
so I usually don't do that, but he's the first person I asked. So I'd sort of written it, and then I wrote it right after sort of Tone Deaf came out, and I'd written the first draft fairly quickly, but and then spent a lot of time sort of fine tuning it. But I really wrote it sort of to make myself happy. I'd been offered this witch movie that was a very good script, but it was kind of about it was like about an evil witch, and I was trying to figure out what would I do with this, and then I realized I if I made a witch movie, it wouldn't be that movie at all. And so I got to writing this, and I was having so much fun. I called Matthew and I said, I'm just going to go try to make this movie. I've got a little bit of money saved up. I ended up taking out a loan as well to finish it. And I said, hey, you want to go make a movie in my yard, on a road, and in a park, and a few other places? And he said, sure thing, man, let's go do it. And then so with a movie like King Knight, which is what's really cool, is when you direct a movie, you have control over a lot of things, but not everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So casting is always the most important thing to me. So it's something like this, the same way things went down with Excision, I had full control over the casting, and even with King Knight, I mean, I was dealing directly with all the agents. I negotiated the actors' contracts and all that stuff. When you make these kind of indies, you kind of have to learn how to do everything. So
Exactly.
so what was really cool was there's no one in the movie that I really didn't want there. So
Is it true? I mean, I think it is true that Matthew has been in all your films except Tone Deaf.
except for Tone Deaf, yep.
Is that scheduling reasons? Did you want him and just it didn't work out?
Scheduling reasons, yep.
Okay. So King Knight, when the IMDb has the release date of 2021 for theater and video on demand. When did it officially release to the public?
So it played at the Fantasia Film Festival over the summer. And that's where we sort of started to garner interest from companies. And XYZ was really awesome, and reached out.
Mm-hmm.
Or I forget. I think I reached out first, actually, because I'm always, hustling, I guess, if you will. But they were just the coolest. And then all my friends said this guy James that works with XYZ was just the greatest. And I talked to him, and he was just so straightforward and honest and cool. Said, let's do it, man. So it was always kind of too. My dad passed away last year, and his favorite movie, 7 years old, his favorite movie had passed many years, was Mandy. He loved Mandy. I mean, he even got me like a mug for Christmas that had the Mandy poster on it. So XYZ put that out. So for XYZ to do this is really kind of special and cool.
That is
I
really.
loved him. I mean, I couldn't say a single negative thing about working with him.
You have spanned the subgenre of horror. Like King Knight is a comedy. Excision, man, shoot, I wouldn't even know how to categorize that. Do you like not pigeonholing yourself into a particular subgenre in horror? Do you like to explore everything? You know, like movies like Excision, King Knight, which is lighthearted, and continue doing different stuff, and maybe even go outside of horror one day.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. My favorite genre of movie is horror for sure. I mean, it's especially growing up. I mean, that was I go back to my dad. We would go to Blockbuster and rent all the horror movies. He would watch all the like gory horror movies with me. He was awesome. Um, and so and then at NYU, I was certainly the only person in my class who attempted to make a horror movie. Most at the time, I don't know how maybe I don't know hip horror was at the school, but it was always my favorite. And so now when I make movies, I almost don't necessarily think about um, genre at all. It's just horror is always there because I love horror so much. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I try to kind of keep things as idiosyncratic as possible and try to make them feel like sort of living uh, things. I love more than anything the movies from directors where when I watch them, I feel like I'm in a human's brain. Like this
Yeah.
could never have been, mass manufactured or anything. I'm literally getting a glimpse into someone's head, and that was always what excited me so much about delving into directors' filmographies and all that stuff. I really love that. So I really try to err on the side of this of giving you a glimpse into what I'm going through at the time I'm making it almost.
A lot of filmmakers, everybody has a different opinion on this, on film school. You went to NYU. Tish, I'm assuming you studied film, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
It's the best film school in the country, at least, maybe the world. How much of your success and in your career do you attribute to everything you learned at film school at NYU?
Um, you know, it's I would say film school is really what you make it, right? So because I know kids that went there and maybe didn't care so much about film by the end of school,
Yeah.
um, uh, and I know kids like myself that like lived and breathed it, and it was I treated each project as if the entire world was going to see it, even though it was some weird student art film that makes me cringe watching now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like that. I think the best thing that happened to me at NYU was moving to New York because it toughened me up. Because being in Virginia, I was definitely a little naive, and I hadn't really sort of seen the darker side of a lot of things. And I was really thrown out of my comfort zone in a very good way.
Yeah.
And it was like instant grow up. I remember coming back from school and the stories I would share with my friends who are, at sort of more collegey colleges. It was from like I went to like a jazz club and I saw someone, fall off the stage and OD or something, to them being like I did a keg stand, and I did, it was just very weird.
Very different.
You know? Yeah.
I was born and raised in New York City for the first 23 years of my life. I own my childhood home there now. My main
That's
hangout
awesome.
my main hangout area was Washington Square Park, back in the
Mm-hmm.
90s when I was a teenager, partying and all that into your early 20s. So Washington Square Park was our home base whenever we would go out and do everything. So I grew up and I saw all the film students around the park, which, by the way, NYU's campus, it doesn't have a traditional campus. The village is its campus,
Right.
basically. Yeah. And you see all the film students around Washington Square Park. I grew up watching them shooting around the park, and you would see people gathering around and whatnot. And it's funny, your story and my story are sort of opposites, where you were born in Virginia and you went to New York, and my kids now who were considering NYU, me having grown up in New York City, that's always a fear. That city will swallow you whole if you let it.
Right.
You know what I mean? It
Okay.
will eat you up alive. The experience, aside from NYU, but just being in the New York City, in the village, outside of school, Would you say that was invaluable to you, the just priceless as far as life experience goes, and you've brought that into your films?
Uh, I would say absolutely yes, unquestionably. I mean, I think it's probably one of the most important things that ever happened to me. I mean, growing up, I love movies so much because it was kind of like traveling. I could watch this movie and travel to this country and watch this movie and hang out with this type of person, and then I'm in New York, and everything is readily available to me. I it was so exciting, and you're so young, you're fearless,
Yeah,
and you're invincible. And then you get a little older. Sorry, I'm in LA. There's helicopters flying.
that's okay.
Uh, but and then you get a little older and you think, oh, what the hell was I thinking? I mean, I could have died like 1,000 times,
Hmm.
you know. And but it was invaluable, and I love my sort of quote unquote sheltered childhood, and I love my gift of being able to sort of explore New York City too,
And come into your own.
and find myself, I guess. Yeah.
King Knight, of course, Matthew Gray Gubler is the star. He plays the character of Thorn. His co-star in the movie is Angela Sarafin. Angela has been doing a lot of work lately. I interviewed another writer director recently who had her in his film. The movie was called Caged. She was also in another film that came out down by the bayou, or out in the bayou, I believe it's called. She is a great actress. How hard was it for you to find Willow for King's Knight?
Well, Willow was so important because it's so important to balance um, Matthew and the character of Thorn with someone who was a very sort of grounded, dramatic actress. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Especially because a lot of the comedy stems from taking everything, at face value, and treating everything as, even the smallest stakes sort of things as if they were high stakes, right? So to find Angela and then meet with her and become friends with her was just, you know, truly, she's one of the kindest people that I've ever met. And we had a Wiccan on set, and at the end asked her if she was a practicing witch, and was just completely convinced. It was, because I just want to make sure that even when we're satirizing something, that it was sort of in, not being mean. So I went to, I had my friends who are witches read the script, and then we did a lot sort of uh, in order to sort of walk that fine line, right? So Angela, I mean, I hope to work with again. I hope to work with her on a million movies. She's become, a great friend, and she makes so much of King Knight work. She makes so
hmm
much of the comedy work.
absolutely. King's Knight, like you said, it sort of pokes fun at sort of the new age witch culture. What made you write about that in particular? What was the inspiration for for King Knight?
Well, really, that's what sort of stemmed from me being offered that evil witch movie, and then wanting to sort of make a movie about my experience with witches. And even, when I moved to New York, I would go to the Wiccan store, and I remember one of my projects sophomore year was a documentary about Wicca. And a lot of my books in my library are still about that. So I feel like, I've been doing research on it for as long as I can remember, just because it's always the religion in and of itself has always really appealed to me, and
Hmm.
everyone's been, who I've met who's a practicing member is so kind. So the idea, one of my heroes, John Waters, would say, if you want to change somebody's mind, make them laugh. So I knew that if I was to sort of be speaking to uh, people where I grew up and the family that I grew up in, and those around us, and try to explain Wicca as not being evil or Satan or whatever. It was to sort of win them over with these kind of characters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so and then and people hate being told what to believe and how to think, right? So I know I couldn't be reverential like 100% and be like, this is the religion, this is the way. You
Mm-hmm.
know, that's an immediate turnoff, I think, for everybody, especially these days. So really, the message of the movie, right, is that we're all searching for the same answers to the same questions at the end of
Exactly. And you're absolutely right. If you go up to somebody and say, I'm a practicing witch, it's an automatic negative connotation. Okay? You're a
it. Right.
witch, you know?
So especially in all
Yeah.
in most of the country.
I mean, let's go back to the Wizard of Oz. Let's go back several hundred years to the witch trials that have went on. It's just a negative connotation. Have you received a lot of positive feedback from the Wiccan community on what you were trying to do?
Yeah, I really have. I've been so sort of grateful. It's from the script stage onwards. I had my friends who are witches read it and sort of fine tuned jokes, so that they were so that I was being sort of funny, but as
Mm-hmm.
considerate as possible too. So that was always important to me, and even though we're sort of riffing on things and certain rituals and whatnot, I think if you're a practicing Wiccan, you see a lot of research went into the movie, and of course it's really funny because the coven in King Knight are eclectic Wiccans, right? So they're
Mm-hmm.
pulling from all these different sort of religions too, and but even Wicca has its traditionalists who don't believe in the eclectic Wiccans and all
Mm-hmm.
that stuff. So it really is like so many other religions in that aspect. Um, but but truly, I've never met a group of members of any religion as kind and sweet as
Absolutely,
Wiccan.
absolutely. As a writer, do you have like a ton of scripts that are ready to go, or do you like to write a particular screenplay and then try to get it made before writing something else?
I write to film make, so I try to I try to write what I'm feeling at the time, almost as if it's like a mad diary entry of sorts, masked in the guise of a film, and then I just go out there and figure out a way to make it.
Would you be
And
open to somewhere down the line as your career progresses to selling a script, letting somebody else direct it, or no? I mean, you wrote it, you want to direct it.
I definitely I never want to say never, right? So I don't want to like limit myself in that way, but I certainly get the most joy out of making these personal things. I think I know so many people that are indie filmmakers as a stepping stone, right? It's a
Yeah.
stepping stone to get to the next thing. And all my heroes are lifelong indie filmmakers. I want to be a career indie filmmaker. And, if I can keep a roof over my head and do that, that's what I want to do. I'm not. It's not sort of I'm not treating this as sort of, the next rung on the way to the top of the ladder.
No, yeah, you're not doing this for glory or riches. You're doing it because you love it.
It just makes me so happy. It's like
Hmm.
really my like reason for living. So I love it. So yeah, I don't want to say never, but it's so much time and effort to you structure it and then you restructure it and then you play around with the structure and then you know all these things that I really, by the time I'm done with it, it ends up being so personal. I it would just kill me not to go try to make it, I
I know.
guess,
Yeah. Yeah, I can totally understand. I want to thank you so much, Richard. Before we go, I want to ask you one last question.
Yeah.
Are you in LA now? Is that now where you call home?
Mhm.
Ah,
Yeah, I'm in Los Angeles. Yeah, I love it. My wife and I got this nice little house in mid city, and I got a garage to work out of, and not a complaint in the world. Honestly, I'm a pretty lucky dude.
so you left the East Coast for, and you're now you're a West Coaster.
I know, I know. I pretended not to like it, because you're supposed to when you first leave New York, you have to say "fuck California."
Yeah.
But now I really do love it. I have a little patch of grass to my right, and
No,
it's
LA
kind of
is
become
beautiful. LA
home.
is beautiful. Who wouldn't like to go out, especially now this time of year in February, in shorts and a
I am
t-shirt?
I am wearing I am in mesh
We are
shorts. My
freezing our asses off here in Virginia, just outside of DC. It's
Oh,
like
I spoke with my mom earlier today. She was telling me.
it's cold. Richard, thank you so much.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. This was a super fun interview. So
Oh, thank you. Again, just one last question: directing or writing, which do you love the most?
directing.
Directing, hands down. Not even
The writing's super therapeutic, but it gets really lonely. And my favorite thing is to collaborate with all the other artists.
nice.
It's all kind of 2D until an actor brings it to life. So.
Absolutely. Now, for our viewers out there, King Knight is available on your uh, streaming platform of choice to rent or buy. Uh,
Please do. Please keep a
please
roof
do
over my
watch the
head.
movie. It's funny. It's great. You're gonna love it. It's listed as having a theatrical release as well. Did it get a theatrical
Yeah, so
release?
that's why I'm kind of tired right now. I was just in Austin. Goobs and I did a few shows in LA. Then we premiered in Austin over the weekend. Now we got some in Phoenix. We've got a week long stretch here in LA. I know we actually played in Virginia at the Alamo. Alamo, I think a lot of one offs in like nine or something Alamo theaters. I'm not quite certain,
Nice.
but I remember our graphic artist, who did the animated sequence. This really great guy Nabi who lives in DC. He drove an hour and a half or whatever out in Virginia and saw his first animated work in a feature on a big screen, and he was
Cool.
freaking out. And it was so awesome to hear from him. It was actually one of my happiest moments in the whole thing. He was so psyched.
That is so awesome. Guys,
Yeah.
again, check out King Knight. It's available on your digital streaming platform of choice to rent or buy. You won't regret it. It's great. Thank you again to our guest, Richard Bates Jr. Thank you to our audience who's watching this live or is watching this later on. Richard, any final thoughts you want to share before we go?
Um, no, no, no.
Sounds
I got
good.
nothing. I'm tapped out, man.
I totally hear you. Guys, till next time, on behalf of Richard and myself, stay safe, stay walking. Good night.
Thank you again.